Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today, Foundations, Collaboration and Value, the Pension Regulator's Data Strategy 2 years in. My name is Antony Marlow. I'm the Director of Data Management here at Cynozure, and I've got the pleasure of this afternoon to be joined by Lisa Allen from the Pensions Regulator, heading up the data there as the Director. 2 years ago, the TPR organisation started the development of its bold data strategy aimed at building strong foundations, driving collaboration, and unlocking value for colleagues, the industry, and also pension savers. Today's session, we're going to reflect on what's happened since then. I'm going to talk with Lisa about what lessons have been learnt, the challenges that were faced and experienced, and also how the vision has become practical impact. So, without further ado, Lisa, when you look back at the strategy launch and what you were aiming to achieve at the start of this journey, what's that journey been like so far for you?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It's really good to talk about this. I'm a big fan on reflecting back on how things have gone, and I've just been thinking about this more recently. So I've been in the Pension Regulator now for 2 years, and that's when we started our work. We actually launched the strategy back in March this year, and we'll make sure that link's available so people can view it because it's published openly. So when I think about it, I think that really we wanted to look at our ambition was really to fundamentally transform how the pension regulator uses data to protect savers, enhance the pension ecosystem, but also drive that innovation. So I think for me, when I was looking back, I don't think we can't do that alone because we sit in this broader ecosystem. So if we would have done lots of amazing things, but we couldn't get data from those we regulated, then we would have been really out of sync. So I think just for context, I don't think people are probably aware, but the Pension Regulator is a government organisation and it has a couple of roles really. So one of those is to make sure that the employers are fulfilling their duties for people who are starting jobs in the workplace, so make sure that they're automatically enrolled and they're contributing to those pension schemes. And then the other side of that is that we oversee the pension schemes then that's looking after the trillions of pounds that people are saving into those. So it's amazing. I think something like 1.5 million employers looking after the employees with pensions, and then around about 4,000 schemes. So I think it was really that, like, what did we start off doing? I think it was about trying to look at how we transformed ourselves, but also that meant we needed to look at how we transformed the industry too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can reflect that 2 years ago and since then. I'm conscious that we've kind of set off on this conversation, this fireside chat. I would just like to point out to the audience that there is the opportunity to kind of drop in some questions that Lisa and I can maybe answer either throughout or perhaps at the end of the session. So please get your thinking caps on, and the Q&A functionality should be available for you to type your questions in there. So just kind of reflecting then, Lisa, back to that starting point. What really was that kind of first trigger for the need for a data strategy then?
Yeah, I think the first bit is it always comes from driving those strong foundations. So when I looked across the estate, I could see that actually some of those things weren't joined up. We weren't using some of the standards in the ways I would expect. I think we had missing like data capabilities. So when you looked holistically at that and how you were going to then leverage that data to drive value, you could see that without those strong foundations, it wasn't going to work. But that wasn't a journey that obviously I could set to do on my own. Yes. So I think it's about how you build those foundations then to unlock value and understanding how data plays a part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'm just thinking about something we'll probably touch on a little bit later. Not just yourself in terms of how you could lead this forward, but equally, it's not just the role of data, for example, in making these capabilities. It spans other functions and support too. So, yeah, perhaps we'll come on to the collaboration bit shortly. But I'm just kind of thinking about that, at the very beginning of this process, what the thing that I'm always interested in is this is quite an investment for an organization, for any organization to spend time and focus on strategizing, and data strategy just being one example. So for me, what is the measure of success as well? What was the success criteria or measures in your mind or the organization's mind when you started out?
I think it's interesting. So on my reflections about us when we first started up, we were very much about a risk narrative where we spoke about, and I think risk was definitely the strongest currency in our organisation. And I think every organisation has currency, don't they, in how they speak. And ours was obviously as a regulator overwhelmingly risk. So you could see that if we got some of these foundations right, then we'd be mitigating lots of those risks that had actually worried the leadership for quite a while. And also, how can we do things better? You could see straight away that we weren't as efficient because actually the way we were doing things meant that other parts of the organisation were duplicating the same thing because they weren't sure, they weren't confident.
Yes.
But I think also then it's about how do you unlock that value? It's got to always come back down to that, as in those regulatory outcomes. So I think it's just some of those questions you can drive, like, can we deliver what we need to do today? Do we know where those risk hotspots are? How do we reduce burden on industry? But I think the narrative you also have to lay over the top. And I found that in the early days, it was interesting because it was about risk currency, was about what's the opportunities. So how can we really push like data science? How once we've got all this together, how can we, and now AI, how can we really leverage that for that additional value?
Yeah, agreed. And actually, at Cynozure, we talk a lot about making data strategy, any initiative and investment, actionable, because it's got to, stand on its own 2 feet. It has to bring that value and lock value for an organization. So, yeah, I'm just reflecting on that, collaboratively we worked on this strategy piece. What stood out for you in that collective approach, the collective work, and reflections?
Yeah, so I think when we first started working together, I think the interesting thing for me was that actually this we realised early on that actually it wasn't a strategy just for the pension regulator. It was also for industry too, because and how we link together. The bit for me, I think, also stood out as how we sit in a broader ecosystem. I think my work previously in other organisations in government, as well as Ordnance Survey, who are amazing, they managed to match up their data, with other, their data doesn't stop at Great Britain's borders. It matches all around the world. So for me to think about that flow of data was really important, and understanding then how do we connect in with others. I think that was like the earliest part for me. And also some of the work I've done in the past, you can really use data as almost like a catalyst for better innovation or transparency or regulatory effectiveness. And I think when you start looking at this, and many people asked me when I came to the Pensions Regulator, why pensions? So I think pensions gets a really bad deal, actually. A lot of people are really reliant on, they are reliant on their pension at retirement. And to be scared of it or not understand how it's being saved or looked after, I think it's got a really bad rep in some ways. So I think it's about putting pensions part of your financial planning for retirement as part of that holistic picture. And you're going to need data to be able to know whether you're going to have a good retirement or an adequate retirement. So yeah, I think there was multiple things in that starting point, that early point, about how do you set out that broader narrative. That when I was looking at this, and you guys were great doing all the interviews with the board and different parts of the organisation, it wasn't just looking for us in isolation. We were looking much broader.
Yeah, agreed, actually, because I think when we have the pleasure of working with many organizations, helping them with their data strategy. I think the thing that stood out for me, you see the distinction of a good data strategy and a great data strategy, and not necessarily the document, the artifact itself, but then where does it go, which we're going to talk about more the rest of this session for TPR. But actually, I think the real differentiators in this work were the fact that you had that executive sponsorship. So it wasn't even just the executive committee and the CEO and all the kind of that level of the organization, but equally the board were invested time and effort and focus and sponsorship of this work. And I think that's something that can't be underestimated. So that was a reflection of mine. And a good old fashioned one, which is about timing as well. I think as well, your arrival, the need for change, the kind of focus, and like you're saying, perhaps a lack of focus in the pensions market and the potential there for data to help industry and savers, and like you say, the ecosystem. It felt like now was the right time too. So interesting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, that board, like buy-in, exco buy-in, I think made this so much better, and it was really good time. We just set up our DDAT functions, that's data, digital and technology, all coming together. So we were building this capability, bringing the skill sets together and looking holistically at this. And I think, it was just almost perfect timing, really. And I think we'd also had some big things going on in the market. So people will see the stuff coming out actually from Pensions Dashboard as the Money and Pension Services are starting to do the connections under the Department for Work and Pension. So they're looking to make sure that you can see all your pensions in one place, and that join up of data. So that focus has been on there in industry, and they've been working towards that, but it's taken a long time to do. So you can see that all of these roads are coming together, which has been really good timing for us as well to be part of the overall picture and how we transform the whole industry for the benefit of savers.
Yeah, agreed. And actually, that's probably where I'd like to steer the conversation next, perhaps, Lisa, is thinking about those external organizations, that ecosystem that you talk about, but equally just kind of driving collaboration. That was one of the main ambitions or aspirations, when we set out on the strategy. So what do you think worked in terms of that collaboration, in terms of teams and departments in TPR in this work?
I think it's really understanding that ecosystem and what that looks like. So for me, when I think about it, I also think about, like, if people haven't looked up the Estonia model, they very much focus on the citizen, and then the government flips that approach to make sure they work together to make sure it's all unified around the citizen. And for me, it was about how can we take that approach and that understanding of that ecosystem and collaborate with others. So actually we do the hard work to join up to make sure we can do the best for those we serve. So I think part of it was just trying to visualize and explain that. So I think one of the most impactful things we started off with is just actually doing that picture, and you guys made it look beautiful, actually. My terrible PowerPoint slide of all the different organizations, because, like, for when you retire, you potentially have your employer pensions, and there could be multiple of those if you've changed jobs. You could have your contract-based pensions that the Financial Conduct Authority look after, and then your state-based pension, which the Department for Work and Pensions looked after. So to know if you're going to have a good retirement, actually there's that join up between all of those three things potentially to understand that. So straight away, outside of us as an organisation, for in the pensions realm, that's one side of it. But also we're bringing in data from other government organisations. We're sharing data with other government organisations. And how can we be a good citizen to make sure the stuff we are sending to them is using modern techniques, and we're not causing inefficiency or costing additional money? So how do we get that flow of data? So that was one side of things, almost like the macro of where we sit in the government structure. But then we needed to look also broader about the industry as well, because whatever we were putting in this data strategy, we'd want them to comment on as well. And we did. We went out for big consultation with industry. We sent them early drafts, which is also a bit scary, when you're starting off in that early collaboration. But we did that internally too. So, you guys are great working with the board and others and the Exco, and doing all those interviews, trying to get all that insight, looking at how this all links to our strategy. Because actually you don't do this for data's sake, as we all know, you're doing it to make sure you're unlocking the organisational value and more societal values as well, and the part that we play in that. So the collaboration, I think, for me was absolutely essential. And I was new to pensions. I think it's interesting when you're coming into a new flavour of data, how you need to pick up very quickly and learn the lessons. But what about for you? What do you think stood out then? What do you reflect on those early days?
Well, I think just building on what you said, Lisa, the real, because it was really about engagement, like you say. So apart from making people feel like they were involved at the start of the process, so not just necessarily gathering input from an interview or workshops, and we held loads of those with functions departments, heads of, right throughout the organization, the breadth and depth of the organization. We covered all corners of TPR, met lots of colleagues, and that was great for input. But equally, I think what was a good investment of time, and credit to, I think, the organization to invest in this, was giving us the opportunity to then go and almost consult. This wasn't strategy by committee, but what it did include was the opportunity, as for us to go and ideate, come up with best practice, source best practice, apply it to the context of, the regulator and pensions, and then go and test that and refine it. And I think that because we invested that time collectively in the project, which was to create the data strategy, we built a momentum up, and that gave you there was a head start, wasn't it, for the organization, because it didn't feel like it was a data strategy imposed. It felt like a data strategy owned by the organization. It wasn't even your data strategy, Lisa. It was the organization's data strategy, and everyone felt they had a part in it. And that's great. I think that truly engaging, iterative approach helps to start to embed this into the DNA of the organization future forward. That's probably one thing that stood out for me. Any thoughts on that at all?
Yeah, no, definitely. And it does. And we always talk about it, that when we talk about the data strategy and our overarching DDAT strategy, so data, digital and technology, we always talk about it for TPR and for industry. So even when we published the data strategy, we've looked in there about our strategy for industry, ours for ourselves. So there are things that we need to do about how we work in lockstep with each other, and that's definitely continued. And as well with the whole organisation, how we can help. Always about the outcomes. I think that's probably the word I say the most. Like it's always about reducing regulatory burden. How do we facilitate market competition? How do we make sure that industry is innovating, all for the benefit of savers? And how can the data help in that? So I think some of the things when we were talking about the vision statement about using data as a form to, the transparency for innovation, that mission statement, or the vision we set out, I think was quite powerful to try and show how we bring that all together to benefit the saver.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, without spoiling the surprise, if people go and look at the go to the website, and we'll share the link in terms of looking at the strategy itself. As you will know really well, living and breathing it is the three stories, isn't it? Certainly the two that really resonate in my mind here is the context of the ecosystem, the fact that we wish to engage and collaborate with industry, with government, share the intelligence and data and the assets that we possess, and then reciprocate back so we can reduce the burden on organizations, but then equally the collaboration internally in the marketplace. How can the organization be more efficient and effective in its core delivery too? So yeah, those still stand out to me as kind of two key points of the TPR strategy in itself. Just thinking, we talked a little bit about momentum there. So a lot of focus and investment was put onto stories and outcomes and output. So yeah, how do you measure value from the data work, what you're doing since and through the strategy rollout?
Isn't that a hot topic across the data community?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think it's really fun, isn't it? Because I think data is the digital representation of the real world. So when we're looking at that, it's how do you then measure whether you're effective in what you do, and how. And so it's that digital representation for me. So I always think it is in two ways. So one of them is about benefit to the organisation. So some of that, like the data professional story and standards. So our foundational story about getting the basic rights is about benefit to us in TPR. So the benefit for us is actually we're a lot more efficient and effective in what we do and how we do it, and it's easier. So that for me is one of the ways that we measure. So are we making it easier for the business to do its job? So are we making it easier to manage risks for schemes? Are we making it as easy as possible to ensure that the employers are automatically enrolling the right people? That sort of thing. Is that data, that digital representation, showing the stuff that we need it to show, and is it as easy and efficient as possible and joined up? So that's one side of things. So I think benefit to the organisation, but then the other part is the value. Then how do we not just do the foundational element? How do we actually do more? How do we get that value for ourselves? So actually we're spotting things before they go wrong. How do we get value by working with others? So actually we're getting that bigger picture across government or across the market. So actually we can be a much more effective regulator in what we do by that value. And how do we then work with our colleagues? Because it's not all about the data team. This is definitely not all about the data team. It's about the whole organization. And how do we then help other teams get some of the skill sets or cross-pollination between the deep expertise in data and the deep expertise in, say, other functions within the organization? How do we get those together so actually we get those insights and that really unlock the value that actually really shifts the dial?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about, as you will know, the opportunity to build reusable assets really in terms of data. So, one of the solutions to that being like master data management. And I know you've been focusing on that since the strategy has gone live. But I was just thinking about that from a kind of what the pension regulator is looking to achieve, and the distinction between pure regulation and in terms of investigation and the kind of quite draconian style of regulation, but actually the positive of, like you say, preventative educational work, communicative work, and bringing those two things together, and that kind of collaboration you talk about, and professionalism, and then the marketplace too. So just building on that, and I'm sure one thing of interest to all of us here on this call, and certainly data community, is any tangible examples that you could maybe share with us to bring this to life, because these are the stories that we sometimes struggle to articulate to our stakeholders and to the boards in our respective organizations.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it depends on the lens. Now, the lens is really important, and the team you're talking to. So this is, I suppose, as all data professionals, you have to be a chameleon and make sure you're changing to whatever color, that blends into your background or the people you're talking to. So I definitely think that's important. So I think about, if I'm talking to our DDAT team, when we're talking about building out the data infrastructure. So we've done a lot of work on the data platform. And I was really lucky when I came into TPR that we've already started doing some really good stuff, but we weren't looking at it holistically as data infrastructure and how we join it all together. So one of the things we've done is a target data architecture for the next 3 years, and how do we work towards that target state? So actually then that has meant now with AI really pushing through heavily, actually we're in a lot better position to exploit it, because when you're looking at the structured and unstructured data, how you can surface that. I mean, even just recently, we've got on a Microsoft Azure platform, and we've been using Purview to do our data dictionary as part of our data marketplace. And obviously Copilot's gone across there, and you can see the potential to add value about the questions now you can ask of that. It's not turned on yet, actually. We were just looking at it this morning. But as soon as that part is, it changes it, doesn't it? From what data do I have? I'm just trying to look it up to tell me about this data. So it makes it so much more, it makes it a lot easier to interact with the data that you have and how you've got it. So that's one of the ones that I'd talk to. And that actually would resonate with some of our regulatory teams as well, who want to know what data we've got, how many of X, Y, or Z, some of those things. Some of them are about efficiency. So we've just pipelined like our official stats as an organization that we have to get out. So that means that it's just a lot easier for us. So it takes away the frictions. That's like more of a benefit side of things. The other side, I think some of the more tangible ones for us is that industries really engage with us, and they will want to form part of this. So at the moment we're launching our data and digital industry working group. And we had about 60 people apply for that, which is amazing, because that just shows that industry wants to work with us, so we can collaborate together, so we can share data in better ways, so that we don't put that burden on them, so we can become more efficient and add that value and both get what we need without actually putting that burden there.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the nuggets that I took away from this whole work as well is that not necessarily industry, but for government, actually, the depth of knowledge that you gather through the pensions lens of public data, people's data, is at the finest level of granularity of detail. And actually, you're then able to share that back into government. So actually, it's a real key resource for government, and therefore making that efficient, effective, and appropriately used in the rest of government is just beneficial to society as well. But something that's probably not perhaps recognised, picture the landscape of data across the whole of government.
Everybody thinks we probably government have already got it sorted, or they haven't got it sorted. There's probably two views, isn't there, on that side of things?
Yeah.
If you're in government or not in government, you see it. So for us, we've also shared our some of our data sets where we're able to on the government's data marketplace. So if you've not seen that, that's going to form part of the government's national data library. So the idea of capture once and use many where possible. Obviously, there might be restrictions. Is in that ethos to make sure that if we've got it in government, we can share it around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the examples I think you gave there, which there were many, Lisa. One thing that we always encourage in helping organisations to really land their data strategy is the importance of incremental benefit and value. You can't simply do, I think most of us will know the days of waterfall and the big bang at the end are well and truly over. You've got to be able to show that benefit throughout the journey. So with that in mind, this is now a couple of years on, the strategy has been developed and launched. How are you keeping focus and keeping momentum going since then?
Yeah, so I think no conversation would be right today without saying AI. So I think AI has really helped with this. It's really pushed it forward, because actually, if we want to unlock the potential of generative AI, especially, then we'll need to do these foundational things. So I think that has helped with the momentum. Because actually we definitely need to do them. The other side that things that have really helped actually is being part of the DDAT directorates. We've got digital, technology and data, and actually digital have been working very closely with the business, asking, what's the outcomes you want to achieve? And then we're able to work in lockstep with them on, okay, how do we represent that then digitally, in the data version? And we've been doing that, like even this week, we've been talking about this on master data management. How do you make sure that whatever we deliver in data is delivering those business outcomes? And then we'll duck down and do the techie stuff, but come back making sure we're holding that mirror up and go, this is what you meant. So I think it's been really helpful being in that broader team in data, digital and technology, where we've been working really closely together for that skill set and working across the organisation, because we get better coverage. We've also been working together in we've got an innovation service where we've been talking about policy innovation, where we've been going out to industry as well. So we've been in lockstep, and I think there's quite a lot of momentum. There's a pension conference even this week where we've got a stall and we'll be talking about things. So I think the organisation is really bought in. So I think that really helps with the momentum. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think you're right there that we talked about collaboration many times through the conversation so far, that very few solutions to business objectives or organizational objectives are purely of one flavor. They're not all going to be data. There'll be a heavy data element, but they'll have digital elements, probably change the business process. So actually that collaboration and effective organization to a holistic solution is so crucial. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, and I can't stop mentioning, obviously, our exec director has been very, because obviously he sits on our exco, but also on our board. So it's good to have a voice at the table constantly. So, you've got a champion there at the highest levels in the organisation.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference. I'm just conscious of time, that we were lucky to get this all done in 45 minutes. But I guess to spin the conversation in a slightly different way, thinking about reflecting backwards then. So if you're going to go back to Lisa 2 years ago, what advice would you perhaps give yourself at that time?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've definitely been reflecting on this on my dog walks just recently, especially with my 2 years coming up for in TPR. I think one of the things I really reflected on is that I came from very almost scientific organisations. So we were very strong on methodology, scientific methodology, hypothesis testing. It was all very ingrained in many of us. But I think the culture is different in financial services. So I think adapting that sort of style, or understanding what the currency is for your organisation, like the risk currency is definitely one of ours, and accountancy and that side is different. And I think just understanding that bit earlier on, I think it might have helped some of the messages land with the people on the ground. Because I think I had an expectation that there'd be that rigor of methodology, but it's different, because actually there's different types in that financial sector about how you do things. So yeah, I just think it's slightly different, depends on the organisation you come from. is one of my big things at that point.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's, clearly different cultures in different organizations, but equally different cultures in different sectors, even if they're all kind of variant of government. So that's quite interesting. Did you learn any other specific lessons kind of through this work, maybe at the start, but also on the journey?
Yeah, so I think the organisation was ready for change, which made my job so much easier.
Yeah,
I've reflected that actually the support has been amazing, absolutely amazing across the organisation. They've, put up with my mad ideas, my arm waving. They've talked me through it. They've told me when things wouldn't work. So
yeah,
just that learning approach and that support's been amazing. I think I always refer to it as the leaky bucket. You have to say things over and over again.
hmm,
So you may presume that you've told people and you've got their buying, but you might
yeah,
not have done. So I think don't underestimate how many times you're going to have to say things and like show the way, the vision, how you set that out. So I think an important one for that is show, not tell. So if there
yeah,
are things you've seen that, the direction you want to go, I'm forever pulling up other things, going, look at that. That's what I'm talking about. That's where we need to go. And I
yeah, yeah,
think that show is really important. And the other bit, I suppose, is that drumbeat of comms as well, because it's hard on your team when you're working so hard to transform like this. So I do like these week notes for my team where I'm sharing what I've been up to, just to let them know that like I really value all the stuff to do, because actually it's not about me, it's about it's about my team and the whole organization and how we all work together. So I think sharing that's just really, really important. And that's the sort of thing that falls off the list. So I'm not always brilliant at it. I don't manage it every week, but as much as possible, just to let them know how we're shifting things forward.
yeah. And I think that's important with, when you in a certain organization of a certain size and scale, and you've got quite substantial teams. Um, the fact that you've got to keep those communications lines open and show the fact it's like cohesion, isn't it? Especially in this modern hybrid world, like we're having a session online now and we're all collaborating online. We don't often get the luxury of spending all of our time in the office with our colleagues. So actually that kind of comms internally is really important. And I think the thing that really stands out for me about the work we did and the work of the pension regulator, I mean, the fact that we can share a link and the strategy is published, it is there, it is viewable and accessible to everybody, is a unique selling point for this work as well. Because actually, I think the one thing that was recognized when we set out on this journey, both for the data strategy and equally the DDAT strategy that we did in parallel, was the fact that this is, the communications effort was so important, not just in briefing what could be potentially quite a technical document, a very specific document about data, but as you know, Lisa, actually it's very much centered on the ambition of the organization, what it wants to achieve. We spend so much time on thinking the backwards and forwards, copywriting this, plain English, making it very, stripping out all the jargon, making it a very accessible document so that it could then be briefed to not just the data team, but the wider organization. And again, I think that was part of the adoption success. So yeah, for me, when I think about what I recommend future forward for organizations is copy what we did here at TPR in creating something that's a communications artifact as well that could be published. So yeah, what's your thoughts about that piece? Because that was a substantial investment of time in itself, as well as formulating strategy.
Yeah, because I think it really makes you hone the messages, because it's going to be publicly there. Then you need to really think about what it means for industry and then what it means for TPR too. And I think I love that about government, actually. We're often publishing things openly, and that's really good because that means then we get to reuse it and we don't all reinvent the wheel. So it's a good investment of time and energy, and others can learn from it. So yeah, I definitely think being out there publicly is a good thing. I agree with you. I think one of the things that's really interesting is, when is techie too techie? And
Yes,
just that question, are there
fine
things
line.
where, yeah, it's a really hard
Very,
question, isn't it? And sometimes I think, is it techie, but actually people really need to know that term? I think we should be pushing people forward, or is it just too techie?
yeah.
So yeah, I've asked myself that many times on that, and some of them I think people like generally I think we need to share some of these techie terms and adapt, and learn to use them. And other
Yeah.
times, yeah, maybe I'm being too techie, and I'll just save that for my own team.
Indeed, yeah. I'm smiling here because I remember the time and the number of iterations of master data management and whether it's in, out, and how simply we explain that concept. So we'll kind of let people ponder on that one and maybe look at the document itself. So I think, it's great to have a conversation reflecting back on what we learned and what's been achieved so far. But surely we've got to finish on the question is, or what comes next? What's next for TPR's data journey?
Yeah, so we've got the Data and Digital Working Group that is launching in November. So that'll be really good. So we've been working on our own journey, but actually industry has also been working on theirs. So that for me is going to be really important about where we need to start pushing together now. So if we're talking about capturing data in different ways, so, like APIs or whatever capture methodology you want to use, or how we're going to start using AI, for example, that group's going to be really key, I think, in working together. So we had quite a lot of people who are really interested in joining that. So I'm fascinated to see that part. I think for us, it's also about standards and making things as easy and efficient as possible. I think we're going to continue with that journey and making sure we're seen as data infrastructure. The whole time we need to be thinking about that data as infrastructure and how we build that up so we can get the answers that the business needs. That whole time it's got to be on that business value. The whole time we can't stop our eyes pointing at that. And the last one is about AI, obviously. So how do we really leverage that for the benefit of savers safely, responsibly, and ethically?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about momentum, isn't it? Maintaining momentum now that it's started. So, and dare I ask perhaps a final question before I go to the audience, and if people want to type a question into the box on the side, and we can maybe start to ask some questions if there are any from the group. Yeah, Lisa, if I leave you with this one last question, let's say we repeat this, webinar in a couple of years' time, what would success look like then for you?
Oh, it would just be I suppose, I don't know, I'd probably go for lots of things. I think about the flow of data, that actually that is seamless. So we've reduced the burden on industry where we can, and that actually the business is getting all their insights. Not only that, we're predicting stuff. So I think that it's just that really good holistic view, so we can make sure that savers are protected, we're enhancing and we're innovating. So I think that for me, if we can get to that stage where we've got that flow and it's seamless, and yeah, maybe that's utopia. How many years did you say?
2. I was aiming for 2.
Okay, maybe I'm a hard taskmaster.
That's quite an ambitious goal you've set.
It is quite hard.
It's recorded the tape as well, so we definitely hold that against you, Lisa.
Okay, we'll come back to that one.
Absolutely. Well, look, are there any kind of questions that anyone would like to pose before we perhaps wrap up the conversation? I can't see any popped up in the Q&A or in the chat at all. So I'll give it a moment. No, I think it looks like we have done. So I think, we're getting towards time anyway. Without further ado, what I will do is say, just thank you very much, Lisa, for sharing your brilliant and practical insights, and, especially being involved in this work with the team and with TPR and colleagues too. It's really great to see how things have progressed and exciting to see kind of what's going to come next. So yeah, big thank you for your time this afternoon, and thank you to the audience as well for joining. Hopefully we've left you some ideas and some inspirations to go and build and succeed in your own organizations too. So you can find out more about Cynozure and TPR through our websites. In the chat, we've included the direct link to the actual strategy itself. And yeah, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Bye now.